explained it all right there. I think we're good. Alright, I haven't been feeling good, so if I'm coughing and stuff, I'm not going to die. But I don't like talking in front of people, so that'll be interesting. Alright, so you guys may already know, my name is Cody Osborn. I'm 19 years old. You know that saying, you don't judge a book by its cover? Well, that's how I look at my life.
You got this, babe. You got it.
Alright, well, to give you an idea of how I grew up, when I was younger, my dad worked for an electrical company. We moved all the time. I lived here, there, that, and the other. I don't really know exactly how many different places I lived, but I know I didn't live in one place for very long. When I was about 8 years old, first time I got caught stealing, I was never trying to listen to my parents, and I had a cop come talk to me at school. I don't know why I wanted to steal at that age, but we did it anyways. We went to church every Sunday when I was a kid. I paid attention and I enjoyed church. I didn't. In 2005, we moved to Hutchinson, Kansas, which is, to me, my first official home. I've lived there for the last 10 years or so. About 10 years. And I started going to school in Yoder Charter School when I was in 5th grade. I guess you could say I wasn't their favorite student. I was called in the office a lot, not listening, just causing problems. In the summer of 2012, my parents sent me to a summer camp in Lampy, Missouri, at a boys' ranch. This summer camp was called Survival of the Weakest. We lived in the woods for a month, and we had Bible studies every night. I had to build my own shelter. I had to live off of the resources. And during this 1 month of my life, I became a lot firm believer in Christ. And the day they picked me up, I was much improved from what I was doing at the time they sent me away. When I hit 8th grade, my parents sent me to Haven Middle School. My older brother had already gone to school there, so I knew a few people. But my grades were still low. My attention level was even lower. I barely made it through that year, but I passed and I was going to high school. Now, to this point in my life, my parents have been constantly struggling with what to do with me. So I was always being disobedient, dishonest, so as you can imagine, they had probably had enough by now. So we're in my freshman year. I was excited even though I was back to the bottom of the food chain. I didn't care. I had a popular big brother and I spent as much time around him as I could. I was staying out of trouble for the most part, still being difficult and dishonest, but I was coasting under the radar as I saw it. Not even 3 months into school, my parents received a call saying something along the lines of that I was a threat and I could not go to school. Later that day, the Haven Police Department wanted to talk to me and my parents, so we went. I was arrested right in front of my mom and dad for criminal threat. I told the kid in school I wanted to kill him. My mom was in tears, telling me not to fight it because it would just make things worse. I could only think to myself, I think I messed up a little bit too bad this time. So, when the judge called my parents and decided I wasn't a threat, my dad came and got me. And at this point in life, my parents had had enough. On October 10th, 2008, my parents sent me to the LUC Boys Ranch in Lampy, Missouri. The LUC stands for Lives Under Construction. To me, this fit pretty well for my life because I had a lot of work to do. The first couple months weren't that bad. I was staying out of trouble just to try to get home. At this ranch, you had to work hours if you got in trouble. If you got in trouble for lying, you'd work 2 hours. You got fighting, 10 hours. So I tried staying out of trouble because I did not like to work very much. But after a few months, they just kept pushing my buttons, trying to get me to blow up and figure out why I was sent there. I dug a lot of post holes. Around the 4th or 5th month, I started getting beaten. I got into a lot of fights in response. I got a lot of hours for work. For a matter of 6 months, I was sexually and physically abused by other kids and staff members as well. I only got to talk to my parents once a week on the phone. I started to tell them that things weren't right and they needed to come get me, but since there was always a staff member right there, I could not give any details due to the fear of what they might do to me. So they would tell me just to tough it out and I'll make it. Well, I did. I became very violent and aggressive. I would defend the younger kids from the staff, which just got me into more trouble. Now, when I went here, there was only 18 kids. When I left, there was 28. The youngest kid that was there was 9 years old. The oldest was 21 years old. I started to hate any authority figure. I had no respect. There was one man in particular, though, that wasn't bad. His name was Charles. He watched the dorm at night. He wasn't one that would abuse us or anything. He didn't know what was going on. I started to stay up late with him, reading the Bible and trying to reconnect with God, because I had long lost him throughout this journey in life. The ranch owners took us to a different church every Sunday. I couldn't understand a thing when it was different religions, different sermons, a different preacher every Sunday. So my time with Charles was important to me. Eventually I stayed out of trouble, but things were still going on that shouldn't have been. I got my own room with just one other ranch boy, who was my friend. On October 3rd, 2009, him and I ran away. We had no other choice but to stay in the woods for 3 days, right by the ranch, just watching and waiting for things to calm down. The ranch didn't contact my parents for almost a day. It had already been gone. This is when my parents realized that there was definitely something wrong. I had never done anything this bad. After 3 days of waiting, we made our move. I stole the car and I started driving home. I drove for 6 hours. Finally, I ran out of gas in Vicksburg, Kansas. So I started walking down the highway, thinking I could walk the last 4 hours home. I stopped at a gas station to look at a map and started walking. Right after, about 7 miles after the gas station, the cop drove by. I looked at my friend and told him, the cop's going to come back and arrest us. I asked him what he wanted to do. We could either run through the trees or keep walking down the road. We decided to keep walking. After the cop came back, sat us down on the side of the highway. I admitted to stealing the car, so he arrested us, took us to some police station in some small town. After hours of no sleep, the guards at the holding facility fed us. They never took the cuffs off, but they were pretty nice to me, I suppose. I laid down on the floor trying to sleep. I was transferred to a holding cell and was made aware that my parents were on their way to get me. At this point, I was finally relieved. I had gotten the point across to them, so they decided to pick me up. They went to the ranch, and my dad tried talking to the owner. He refused to talk, so my dad decided I wasn't safe there and brought me home. But adapting to regular life was very hard for me. I was so aggressive and violent, I couldn't show any weakness. I was scared to become a victim again. I started school again back in Haven, where nobody even knew where I went in the first place for the last year. Through my sophomore year of high school, with hardly any problem, this is when I started using random girlfriends for whatever I wanted. I was doing drugs, drinking every time I got the chance. I stayed in this stage of life for a long time. I became a junior. I was doing good in school, still doing drugs, drinking, and using women for my own needs. I was accused of holding a knife to some girl's throat, who happened to be my ex, and just so happened my car was broke down and I was riding the bus that day. My dad came and picked me up for I was kicked out of school for 3 days. He immediately knew I did not do it. He asked me if I was ready to get some work done around the house, and I said yes. So I served my 3 days, I went back to school, upset at how things went. About a week later, one of her friends accused me of touching her inappropriately in my shop class when I was working under a truck the whole hour. I told them that it was impossible, but they still wanted to expel me. They got what they wanted. I was out of school for good in my mind. I started working full-time. My parents let me live my own life. I still had rules, but I was living the life of an adult, so they didn't see much point in trying to control me. I was partying hard as often as I could, lying about where I was, and had now started to see women as objects in life, not people. Finally, my court case for school came around about 8 months later. And as I thought, I got screwed. I got more probation, more rules. And I stayed on probation until I received my GED on my 18th birthday. I passed the test and I was free again. I started to follow in my father's footsteps. I got a job working for the same electrical contractor out of Wichita. I was moving forward in the job field, but moving backwards in how I lived my life. I was getting drunk every night. As soon as I was off work, showering, looking good, I was drinking, having fun, doing more drugs, getting tattoos, piercings, not ever going to church. I had completely fallen away from Christ.
And you could see what happened to me. I ended up getting a girl pregnant. She miscarried. So now I was getting even more drunk than before and trying to ease the pain of losing a child. And it stung me deep, but still didn't make me turn my life around. It just sent me deeper into a dark hole I had been digging for years. This time I'm back home, I'm jobless, still finding a way to get drunk or get my fix for the day. I ended up working at Sears and Hutch during August 2012. I had started to pray to God every once in a while, and I was still getting drunk, doing drugs, using women as objects. I still hadn't learned my lesson. So my prayers weren't very heartfelt. I asked God over and over why He put a child in my life that would have most likely turned me around and then just take it away like that. Here's where my turnaround happened. I was at work one day. It just had been a rough week. I told God if He was really there and He really wanted to help me, He would put something or someone in my life to turn my life around. Upon leaving work that night to go get drunk, my buddy calls me, says, "Hey, I just broke my key off in the door of my truck. I need your help to get my spare." So I drove over to him. Well, it was two of my drinking buddies from the summer before. They had some cute girls with them, and my buddy tells me, "Well, this girl thinks you're pretty hot." So I took that and ran with it. Now, as you're probably thinking, all I was just planning on use her for what I needed and go home. Well, something inside me said I needed to get with her and have a relationship for once. So I did. We started dating September 22nd, 2012. Her name is Dakota, she's sitting right over there. She ended up pregnant with our beautiful son, who's also over here somewhere. She was putting my life to God to help me open my eyes. I can honestly say if it wasn't for her in my life today, I'd be sitting in a jail cell somewhere for some stupid decision I made. Ever since I've gotten with Dakota, I quit drinking. I don't do drugs anymore, though I've struggled with it over our relationship. It's even harder when you're around it all the time these days in society. I wish a lot of these things had never happened to me. But if it wasn't for all this stuff, I wouldn't be the strong-willed person I am today. The devil tried breaking me over and over, but yes, I did lose faith for temporary times, but I always climbed back to the light, as you would say. I guess the advice I can give from my experience is that the devil will try pulling you down in so many ways, whether it be women, drugs, drinking, but you can't lose your faith. You can't give up, and you can't give in. You got to stand strong, you got to keep your head up, and you got to keep believing and praying, because God is always there to pick you up when you fall. I'm sure you all have heard the old saying of a man walking next to God in the sand, and God points at two sets of footprints, and then it turns into one set, and then back to two again. And the man asks God, "Well, where were you here?" God tells the man, "That's when I was carrying you in your hard times." God carried me on His shoulders for most of my life, and I can finally say that my life with God is starting to get back where it needs to be, and there are now again two footprints in the sand.
Amen.